Hey guys, I hope you're good. Welcome to another episode of Divide Podcast. This episode is a fantastic episode because today is a fantastic day also. Today is about 2 to 3 hours ago, Arsenal almost won the league like they did a year ago, and City won the league like they did a year ago, and it's just fantastic. As you can hear the spring in my voice, I really enjoyed today. It was fantastic. But yeah, okay, so now on a serious note, even though that's a very serious topic to discuss, but I hope everybody's good. I hope you're enjoying the second quarter of the year. I hope that May has brought good tidings and good news and good vibes, and you've learned one or two from the month. I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing a lot of things personally. I'm trying to tick a number of things off my to-do list. I've been, like in the previous episode, I was talking about how I've delayed on some things and I'm finally getting them across the line. E.g., I finally announced together something I've been working on since January actually. Interestingly, some of the videos that we released, that's this week, we recorded them like almost over a month ago, and I've just had it. And I was just thinking about and overthinking about what to do, what the next step should be. And I finally just said, I'm just going to do this thing. I'm just going to announce this new project that I'm trying to work on. So, yeah, if you don't know about Together, you should go on Instagram, check my Instagram page, AMB on full stop ORE or order underscore together. Together, TGEDA. Together. Order together. To see what we're working on. Basically, it's a very interesting idea that I had about helping people to afford items that they want for cheaper prices because they are buying them in combos. And yeah, I'm looking forward to testing that hypothesis. But I hope you're good. Today's episode is going to be something related to many things. I was listening to a fantastic sermon by Tim Keller, and my God, I think it was the Search for Substance, and Thomas Keller was basically explaining how that the more we detach ourselves from God, the more we do not take responsibility for the various things in our lives that we might not enjoy but give our life meaning, the more fickle we become, the more light we are, and the more, in his words, the more chaff we become, because the Bible speaks about not being like chaff being thrown back and forth with every wind of doctrine, like basically having more roots. And Timothy Keller made a fantastic analogy about how roots help us to be grounded, and roots also limit us in that we cannot just go anywhere we want to go because we have roots. So roots strengthen and ground us, but roots also ensure that we're not tossed to and fro, and we have limits, and having limits is not a bad thing. And I personally really like that analogy, and like the way he put it, that with life, the more you, and I think I've forgotten this guy's name, Jordan Peterson also explained something similar, that the more responsibility we have, the more things we do, not because we want to do them but because we have to do them, the more those things give our life meaning. Like your mom being your mother and doing all the sacrifices that she did for you gave her life meaning, and that responsibility she took on made her a better person, even though it also stressed her. And that our generation is becoming more or less more miserable because we are cutting off every form of responsibility that we don't like, because we want to just do what we like and what feels good. And because of that, we have opened ourselves up to a very high level of fickleness. And I found that very, 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 very interesting. I think one of the interesting things that I learned from that sermon basically was Tim Keller was explaining about how there was a time in the history of America, that's when the technology era was booming. The economy was getting stronger, new companies were coming up, there was then an economic boom, but also he stated that in that era there was a 300% increase in the suicide rate in America in that time. And I was like, what? And I think teenage suicide rate, and that even though everybody knew what was happening, nobody could explain why it was happening. And then he explained that, but one person could give a decent description as to the why, and it was somebody that actually committed suicide. The person hung himself on a tree, and before he hung himself on a tree, he wrote a suicide note that said that it seems like this is the only thing around this area that has any roots. And that was so interesting, because basically, despite how things were booming, despite how there was more economic growth and all that, there was still just a hollowness to live in generally. And I think that's a very deep lesson to learn about life, that life, even though some people have an expectation of life that is like that, if everything goes well, I will be satisfied, and that speaks to like a sensuality or like an imagination of what life should be. And I don't know how to explain how that is bad, but if you don't prepare for all that life throws at you, and you only think of the upside as to every decision that you make, if you're only here for a good time, you would literally have very little spine, because life doesn't work like that. And I think it's important to understand that life is a mix of many things, and in the experience that is life is the up and the down, and your preparation, your awareness, your ability to take all that life can throw at you and optimize for the right decisions, optimize for the right mindset against all odds or whatever happens, the better prepared you are for it. And I think that was just hearing him explain what I think is similar to what's happening to us now, because now you look at in terms of, even though we are living in a more difficult climate economically, but there is a lot of opportunity and upward movement in terms of tech adoption, the tech wave, the tech era for companies. There is a massive opportunity to grow wealth ridiculously. I think there's one statistics I saw that it's easier now to become a millionaire than it was a couple years ago. And that is true, but also because it's easier now to become a millionaire than it was a couple years ago, it means that it's easier for you to feel like you've not made it because you're not a millionaire, because of the sheer number of people that yesterday were not millionaires but today they're millionaires. And I think a huge part of this can be linked to social media. And you see, generally people don't realize how much social media has made them impatient, made them unhappy, made them savage, even in their own assessment of themselves, and how they've shrunk their lives into their life's expectation in comparison to the picture perfect 30 seconds of other people's lives. And that's just a ridiculous standard to put oneself or compare oneself to. So now, because you can see good news about people, and you can see mostly good news or bad news about people, there is a sharp expectation of yourself for your own life, simply because your comparison of your life to other people's life is either the highest or the lowest point. It's actually crazy. And that comparison makes us just generally more dissatisfied. And that possibility of anything can happen, good or bad, makes us erratic with our expectations. And I think it's something to consciously and continuously hold oneself from, that you do not fall into the hole or the expectation that things will go as planned because you're comparing your life to somebody else's peak and you don't know anything that follows after. We have said it many times on this podcast how people's bad financial decisions can inspire other people to make bad financial decisions because of what they've seen on social media. And it's just unfortunate how much the internet prepares us and also influences us and also directs us, which is why it's important to take breaks every now and then. It's important to wake yourself up to the reality that this is what your life is, and you need to love your life for what your life is and not make your life about the life of other people that you've seen on social media. I think it's very important for your happiness, for your sanity. It's important for you to be your best version and be happy, to know that you are not just a comparison to be made with others. Your life, your life best, and you should appreciate that. I think it's primary and essential for you to understand that process, understand where you are at, appreciate it, because life is both the up and down. And even though we try to make constant comparisons with peaks of people's lives, it's important that we hold in balance the reality that our life is. Because if you knew anybody's reality as a whole, you would see the humanity and you see the ordinariness to life. But there's a superficiality to social media and how the presentation of perfection and the presentation of a fantastic experience, or the movie-like the movie-like presentation of people's lives. I think it's very, very important. It's very, very important to hold oneself, because if you don't hold yourself, you would think that you are the only one not living your best life, not knowing that everybody in your generation is actually not as happy as they post to be on social media. And sometimes I think what's the most frustrating is actually how you can be setting expectations for yourself, and you yourself in this context is a full picture of your life, to just 30 seconds of another person's life. And I think it's wicked to do that. Very wicked to do that. Very wicked to do that. And that's why, even with football, I think football is a very good example to give. Football is, every time I get into conversation with people about Manchester United, I tell them that Manchester United has a fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is not about the coach or the team, or that's the players in this context individually. It's about the direction of the club generally. And everybody that has come to try and fix a segment of the club has fallen prey to the overall lack of direction from the owners of the club. And every time I explain that, people try to just look for but you guys are not playing well, and you're still signing players. But I understand my club very well enough to not just place any type of expectation on them. And I think it is wisdom to not expect what is unrealistic realistically because that can lead to frustration. And a lot of people fall into that cycle of frustration because they have unreasonable expectations of things. So Manchester United, some people thought they would win the league this season, and I knew that wasn't possible. But I set my expectations realistically, and I said, okay, I wanted us to improve our play. And when we realized that injuries started coming up, I knew that it's going to be a tough season ahead, and I adjusted my expectation. But some people, think that expecting higher, whatever it is, realistic or unrealistically, doesn't matter. So far, you just say, oh, they failed, or they passed, or they did great. And it's because I think I've said this before on Twitter, like, as a supporter of a club, you are there to support the club. If the club is going through a hard time, you're there to support. I remember the time when my tenant wanted to curse me, that I had to go on loan because I said this people want to kill me. Part of that was because also that they broke my heart when they sacked Jose Mourinho. But yeah, I went on loan to Spurs and I came back. But it was nice. But basically, having a realistic expectation is good because it helps you to not be frustrated, and it helps you to understand things through balanced perspective and not go to any extreme. Because whether you have an unrealistic or a realistic expectation of life will still happen. And when that happens, you'll be left at a disadvantage, which is why it's important to hold all things in balance. Just as you aspire and you, Maguire, for greatness, hold it in balance that, whatever happens, I'll give this my best. I think it's good to set more expectation on yourself on the things you can control and the things you can't control, because the things you cannot control will frustrate you more, but the things you can control will make you better if you focus on that. So primarily, what I'm saying is, I hope you'll be able to understand a bit what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is that it is better for you to focus on the things that give you roots and the things that give you responsibility, rather than hold on to expectations that have nothing to do with your control, and you just want to do it just because a lot of the things that we think will give our life meaning, for instance, money, fame, popularity, those things might not give our life as much meaning. Like, it's psychologically proven that the things that give people the most happiness are actually people and relationships and depth of the relationship, and the realistic and the depth of the relationship, the quality of the relationship, that comes from experiencing life together, that comes from growing together, going through different phases together. For instance, a relationship is grown together, is built together through the hard and through the good times. Relationships don't just start good and keep on going good. A lot of K-drama and a lot of Netflix series have built, and movies generally have built, the idea that relationships are meant to just be smooth from beginning to end, and there's no problem. And any relationship that doesn't give that kind of energy is not given. But that's unrealistic. So, Delulu or Solulu, is it to be delusional? Is delusion good? Because our generation has pivoted delusion as something that is worth, like thinking through. Like, think delusional, just shoot for the stars, and at least you fall on the clouds. Or you can shoot for the stars and end up in Oshogbo. Or you can shoot for the stars and end up with deep disappointment that basically changes the person that you are. Or you can be realistic and still shoot. Aim high, but know that, okay, set realistic goals. I think you hear this in every time when you're saying set goals, but set realistic goals. And I think it's important. This is a very key lesson, because we live in a world where people get depressed for not achieving things, and they derail themselves for 1 year, 12 months because of things that happen along the way, which is generally what people will call life, ups and downs. So have a balanced perspective. Aim for the high, prepare mentally for the lows, and do your absolute best. Trust in God to see you through. Have a strong foundation in Christ, because that is what will keep you rooted in the midst of life's challenges. Because at the end of the day, you win in Christ Jesus. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that it blessed you. Do share with somebody that's going through a tough time or is managing like situations that might seem totally and utterly unfair. You can share with an Arsenal fan. But yeah, thank you very much, and do have an amazing day. I remain your host, Solulu. Cheers.